You want a different life, but every night you rehearse the old one instead. The replayed argument, the worst-case picture before sleep, the quiet, "this is just how it always goes." That is a rehearsal too. And rehearsal, not willpower, is what the mind obeys. You act like God when you do this. You take a wave of pure possibility and press it into a body, a bank balance, a face across the breakfast table. You have done it every day since you were born, whether or not you called it manifesting. Here is what almost never gets said out loud. The men who first mapped this power were scientists and mystics in the same body. Isaac Newton wrote more pages on turning lead into gold than he ever published on gravity, and hid everyone from a church that would have called it heresy. 3 centuries later, physicists ran an experiment that proved the mystics right without meaning to. They all knew the real question was never whether you create your reality. It was always this: how do you turn your own lead into gold? Somewhere in your life, right now, there is a pattern with your name already written on it. Maybe it's the relationship that keeps finding the same shape no matter which face is across the table. Maybe it's the money that arrives and leaves in the same rhythm every single year. Maybe it's the apology you keep rehearsing to someone who never asked for one. You have called this bad luck. You have called it timing. You have called it just how things are for me. Here is the first thing worth sitting with. You have never once been a passenger in your own life. Not for a single day. From the moment you were born, you have been doing exactly what the opening of this video described, pulling possibility out of the air and pressing it into shape. A mood, a decision, a door you didn't walk through. Every one of those was you, creating, whether you were watching yourself do it or not. This is not a comforting idea. It is actually a hard one. Because if you have been creating all along, the pattern that keeps returning was never something that happened to you. It was something moving through you, on repeat, without your permission, which means the problem was never the world being unfair. The problem was that no one ever taught you where to look. Almost 2,000 years ago, a man named Epictetus, born into slavery and freed only in adulthood, wrote a single line the whole Hermetic tradition still stands on. People are disturbed not by what happens to them, but by the judgment they carry about what happens. He was not talking about optimism. He was talking about authorship. He was pointing at the exact hinge this video is pointing at now, the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What in me keeps calling this in?" That question feels dangerous the first time you ask it. It can sound like blame. It is not blame. Blame says you did something wrong. This says something different and far more useful. Somewhere below the part of you that talks and plans and explains itself, a program is running. And that program has been writing your outer life in its own handwriting the entire time. Think about the last time something just happened to you that you swore you never wanted. The fight that started the same way it always starts. The opportunity that slipped through your hand at the exact moment it always slips. If you are honest, not guilty, just honest, some part of you saw it coming before it arrived. Some part of you already knew the shape of it. That knowing is not a coincidence. That knowing is a signature. It is the fingerprint your subconscious leaves on every version of the pattern, over and over, like a hand tracing the same line until the paper wears through. So here is the shift this video is asking you to make, not as a technique, but as a posture. Stop standing in front of your life like it is weather. Start standing in front of it like it is a mirror. Not a mirror that flatters you. A mirror that is finally telling the truth about what has been running underneath. Because if you are the one writing the pattern, even the parts of it you hate, then you are also the only one who can rewrite it. Not by trying harder, not by forcing a different outcome through sheer will, by finding the place inside you where the old signature is still being written and changing the hand that holds the pen. That is where this goes next. Because the moment you stop being the effect of your life and start locating yourself as its cause, a much older question starts knocking, one that every tradition that ever mapped this power asked before anything else. If you are the one writing this, who exactly is doing the writing? There is an old image that answers this better than any explanation could. Picture a drop of water, fully aware of itself, floating somewhere inside the ocean. The drop can feel its own edges. It knows where it starts and where the rest of the water begins. And for as long as it stares only at its own edges, it will spend its whole existence trying to prove that one small drop matters inside something so much bigger. That drop is the part of you that has a name, a job, a body, a bank account, a story about who you are. The ocean is the part the Kybalion calls mind. The all is mind, the universe is mental. The old Hermetic text says, meaning the entire universe is not made of separate things bumping into each other, but of one awareness, thinking itself into a billion different shapes. You, the stranger who cut you off in traffic this morning, the tree outside your window, different shapes of the same water. This is not a metaphor meant to shrink you. It is meant to do the opposite. Because the drop was never actually separate from the ocean. It only felt separate. And the moment it remembers it is the ocean, wearing the temporary shape of a drop, something loosens that has been tight your entire life. Here is what loosens first: the hunt for purpose. Think about how much of your life has been spent asking some version of, "What am I here for?" as if the answer were hiding somewhere you hadn't looked yet, in a job title or a mission statement or a 5-year plan. That search only exists because the drop forgot it was the ocean. If you are, underneath the name and the resume, an expression of the same intelligence that is running every galaxy and every heartbeat without being asked to, then you were never missing a purpose. You were the purpose, wearing a disguise so convincing it fooled even you. Consider for a moment why an infinite awareness would ever bother becoming small, becoming you specifically, with your particular fears and your particular hands. The oldest answer the mystics ever gave is strange, and it is this: an infinite thing cannot know itself as infinite. It has nothing to compare itself to. So it divides. It becomes a drop, so it can finally feel what it is like to be small, to be limited, to be uncertain, and through you, the ocean gets to experience an entire life it could never have experienced by simply staying whole. That is not a punishment. That is the entire reason a single human life is allowed to matter at all. There is a place Hermetic teachers have long pointed toward, where this stops being philosophy and starts being felt in the body, a still center where the noise of "I am small and alone" and the noise of "I am everything" finally stop arguing with each other and go quiet. You do not reach it by choosing one side. You reach it by holding both at once, the drop and the ocean, until the friction between them simply runs out of anything to push against. That is not something you can think your way into on the first try. It is closer to something you survive your way into, usually through the parts of your life that hurt the most. Which raises the question this video has been circling since the opening line, the one almost no one is willing to ask about their own worst years. What if the heaviest thing you have ever carried was never a wound at all? Two people can do the exact same generous thing for two completely different reasons, and the world will call both of them kind. One person builds something for others because there is a hole in them that has never closed, and giving is the only thing that has ever made the hole go quiet, even for a moment. The other person builds the same thing because they are already full, and it simply overflows toward someone who needs it. From the outside, you cannot tell the difference. The building looks the same, the check clears the same, but the Hermetic law of vibration says something the eye cannot see. Everything you do carries the frequency of the place it came from. Generosity born from a hole keeps broadcasting the whole, even while it helps. It says, underneath everything, I am still not enough, and I need you to need me so I can feel like I am. Generosity born from wholeness broadcasts something else entirely. It says, there is enough in me that some of it is simply spilling over, and you happen to be standing where it landed. This is not about becoming a better person. It is about noticing which room the action is coming from before you act, not to judge yourself, but so you can finally stop confusing the two. So before we go further, something needs to be said plainly, because it deserves more than a passing sentence. Whatever hurt you carry right now, whatever you have spent years trying to explain, apologize for, or outrun, none of that makes you broken. It never did. That belief was simply the loudest voice in a very frightened room. Here is a different way to hold it. Somewhere back when you were far too young to understand any of this, you were handed something heavy, not a wound exactly. More like a sealed letter, pressed into your hands by something larger than you, with instructions you were never given. Carry this. Don't open it yet. You weren't ready, and honestly, neither was the world around you. So you carried it. Into every relationship, into every silence after a fight, into every year you told yourself you should be over it by now. What almost no one tells you is what happens on the day you are finally strong enough to open it, not erase it. Open it. Because inside a letter like that is never just pain. It is instruction. The exact sensitivity that made you flinch at being unseen becomes the reason you notice when someone else is invisible in a room. The exact fear that made you over-explain yourself becomes the reason your words, once healed, land with a precision most people never develop. The weight was never punishment. It was training you could not have received any other way. This does not mean the pain was good, or that you should thank whoever caused it, or that healing means rushing to gratitude before you've even finished grieving. It means something smaller and far more useful. The heaviest thing you are carrying is not proof that something is wrong with you. It may simply be a gift that arrived too early, wrapped in a shape you are not yet able to recognize. Here is a small, honest practice to carry forward from this block. Nothing dramatic, nothing that requires a ritual. Before you act today on anything, pause for one breath and ask yourself a single question. Is this coming from a hole in me that needs filling, or from something in me that is already whole, simply spilling over? You do not need the right answer. You only need to start noticing which room you're standing in, because if pain can carry this much intention behind it, so can everything else that keeps arriving in your life uninvited. Which means the next question is not, why does this keep happening to me? It's why does the exact opposite of what I want keep showing up right when I ask for it? Here is a question worth sitting with before the answer comes. Why does the thing you fight hardest to keep away so often walk straight through the door anyway? Picture someone who installs a second lock on the door after a break-in, then a third, then a camera pointed at the porch and an app that pings their phone every time it senses motion. Every choice makes sense on its own. But watch what happens to their body over the following months. The way they check the app before they check their own coffee in the morning. The way a car slowing down outside now reads as a threat instead of a neighbor parking. They wanted safety. What they got, more of it every week, was the felt sense of danger right there in the room with them, because you cannot build a wall without first deciding somewhere in you that something dangerous is on the other side of it. The Kybalion calls this the law of polarity, and it says something stranger than instinct expects. Everything is dual, everything has poles, opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Hot and cold are not two different things, they are the same thing, measured at two ends of one line. Which means the moment you plant a flag that says, "I want safety," you have, without meaning to, also planted its exact opposite a few feet away, because the two cannot exist without each other. You cannot summon one end of a pole without the other end coming into existence at the same time. This is not only true of fear. Someone who feels quietly lonely and starts reaching harder for connection, texting more, showing up to more rooms, needing every conversation to prove something, often finds the opposite arriving instead. A strange, deepening isolation that seems to grow in exact proportion to how hard they're reaching. Not because connection is impossible, because the reaching itself is broadcasting the loneliness louder than any word could. Here is where most people get stuck, and it is worth naming plainly. They think the goal is to land on the good side of the pole and stay there forever. Safety without ever touching fear, connection without ever touching loneliness. But a pole only has one way to disappear, and it is not by picking a side. It is by fully feeling both ends until neither one has anything left to prove. Think of it like a swing on a playground. Push it one direction, call it brave, and it will swing back just as hard toward the other side. Call it afraid whether you want it to or not. Cling to brave and refuse afraid any room at all, and you do not eliminate the swinging. You just get thrown by it again and again, calling it bad luck each time. The only way off a swing was never to push harder. It was to feel the full arc of it once, all the way, until the swinging itself loses its grip on you. This is even true at the largest scale anyone has ever tried to picture. The traditions that speak of light and darkness as enemies at war were never quite finished with the thought. Existence itself needs contrast to know it exists. A single note held forever is not music. It is silence with extra steps. The push toward more life, more variation, more color, and the pull toward stillness and less are not two armies. They are one long, continuous dance, and you have been standing inside it since the day you were born. Which leaves a stranger question than the one this block opened with. If even your protection carries its opposite folded inside it, quietly, without asking your permission, what about the identity you are using to do the protecting in the first place? What if some of what you call yourself is doing the very same thing? Here is a strong claim, and then the contrast that makes it useful. Almost everything you call your personality is a mask, not a lie. A mask. Carl Jung had a name for it, the persona, borrowed from the Latin word for the masks actors wore on stage. A persona is not the problem. Every human needs one to function in a family, a job, a room full of strangers. The problem starts the moment you forget it is a mask and start defending it like it is the whole of you. This shows up in the most ordinary places, and lately it shows up in spiritual language too, in ways almost no one questions out loud. Somewhere in the last decade, a new vocabulary appeared for people looking to feel less alone in their own difference. Old soul, starseed, lightworker, an ancient lineage rediscovered. There is nothing wrong with any of it, and nothing wrong with the comfort it offers. But notice the shape of what it's doing underneath the comfort. It is still sorting people into categories. It is still a version of the oldest game a divided world has ever played. Rich and poor, one tribe and another, one caste above another, just wearing a robe instead of a uniform this time. The ego is remarkably creative. If you take away one costume, it will find a more spiritual sounding one within a generation. None of this makes the label false, or the person wearing it foolish. It only means the label was never the point. You have not been one soul type having one lifetime. If the ocean and drop truth from earlier in this video is real, you have in truth been everything, every plant that ever grew toward light, every atom that has ever been recycled through 1,000 different forms of matter across the life of this planet. Trying on a single identity, even a beautiful one, is a game worth playing. Just never forget, mid-game, that you are also the one playing it. This is what deception actually means once you strip away the dramatic version of the word. It is not a villain hiding in the shadows waiting to trick you. Deception, in the oldest and simplest sense, is anything. A label, a fear, a story about who deceived you once that makes you forget you were never actually separate to begin with. That is all it has ever been. Which is why some people, once burned by real betrayal, spend the next 20 years scanning every room for who might be lying to them next. The hypervigilance feels like protection. Often, it is simply forgetting stretched out over decades, wearing a very convincing disguise. The same forgetting can quietly distort something even more foundational. The creative force running underneath sexuality itself. It is called creative for a reason. It is the same current that turns thought into a business, a poem, a child, a life. And the same lack that can twist generosity into performance or safety into hypervigilance can twist that current too, usually so subtly that the person carrying it is the last to notice. The question underneath it is the same one from a few minutes ago. Is this coming from a hole that needs filling, or from something whole, simply moving through you? None of this, the masks, the labels, the old hypervigilance, was ever running on willpower. It was running on language, on the specific words you have quietly agreed to let define you, most of which you never chose on purpose, which means the real work was never about which identity to pick. It was about noticing what the words themselves have been doing to you the entire time. There is a small word most people say 12 times a week without ever noticing what it is quietly building. I hope this works out. Say it slowly. Hope is a beautiful word on the surface. And underneath it, hope is also an admission. It is the language of someone standing outside the door, waiting to be let in. Neville Goddard spent his life teaching a harder, stranger instruction. Assume the feeling of the wish already fulfilled, not hope for the coffee. Feel yourself already holding the warm cup, not hope for the relationship to heal. Feel in your body what it is like to already be standing on the other side of it. The words you default to are not neutral description. They are instructions your subconscious is quietly following, word by word, whether you meant them as instructions or not. This is not only true in your private language, it is true in the words an entire business gets built on. Picture two companies selling the exact same product. One was built the night its founder sat alone with a spreadsheet, terrified of running out of money, and every decision since has carried that fear forward. Squeeze the margin, extract the value, get the sale before the customer changes their mind. The other was built by someone who kept asking one different question at every meeting. Does this benefit the person in front of us, even if they never buy anything? Not as a slogan on the wall, as the actual filter for every choice. What goes in the ad? What gets said on the sales call? What the product does the moment someone simply tries it? Both companies can look identical on paper. Only one of them is quietly training everyone who touches it, customer and employee alike, to expect scarcity. This is where the old teaching about companies having their own aliveness stops sounding strange. Hermetic tradition describes 5 layers to existence: the physical, which is simply matter; the etheric, a blend of matter and energy; the layer massage and bodywork actually touch; the astral, pure energy with no fixed shape yet; the mental, where many single units of energy braid together into a pattern; and the spiritual, the oneness underneath all 4. A company, believe it or not, gets born on that astral layer first, the moment a founder's fear or love gets concentrated enough, for long enough, to take on a shape of its own. The mission statement comes later. The actual personality of the company was set on the night it was conceived, in the emotional room the founder was standing in at the time. You do not need to run a company to feel this. You have felt it in a store that seemed friendly on the surface, but somehow left you wanting a shower afterward. You have felt it in a small shop where nothing was oversold, and you left with more than you paid for. That feeling was not imagination. It was you, reading the astral layer without a name for what you were doing. Here is where the practice from earlier in this video grows up a little. Before, it was a single breath before a small action. Is this coming from a whole, or from something whole? Now, apply the same question to something with real weight. The message you are about to send, the purchase you are about to make, the business decision sitting in front of you right now. Pause. Ask which room it is coming from. You will not always like the honest answer. That is exactly why the question is worth asking before the decision, not after. Because if a single word like hope can quietly train your whole nervous system toward waiting, and a single founding fear can quietly train an entire company toward extraction, then something much older than either of them is running underneath both. Something with rules that were mapped in careful detail long before either language or currency existed. The tradition that mapped these rules calls itself Hermetic, and it has always described itself the same way. Not a religion to join, but a compass and a map for people who already sense there is more going on than the surface admits. A compass alone tells you which direction you are facing, with no idea what's ahead. A map alone tells you the terrain with no idea which way you're pointed. Together, for the first time, you can actually navigate instead of guess. The tradition traces its own memory further back than almost any other surviving system of thought, back through Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great, a name Egypt and Greece both claimed as their own, and further still, in the tradition's own telling, to Thoth, keeper of the oldest library anyone remembers, and to a lost age the old stories simply call Atlantis, long before either science or scripture existed to divide anything. The pattern underneath that memory is hard to dismiss. Nearly every wisdom tradition that followed, Kabbalah, early Christian mysticism, the alchemists working in secret centuries later, keeps landing on the same handful of laws, described in different words, by people who almost certainly never read each other. That is not a coincidence a skeptic can wave away easily. That is a signature. And the clearest of those laws is the one carved onto the emerald tablet itself. As above, so below, as within, so without. Meaning the outer world you keep reacting to was never a separate thing happening at you. It is a printout, a downstream copy of whatever pattern is already running upstream, inside you, usually below the level where you'd notice it running. This is where the victim story quietly runs out of road. Not because bad things never happen to good people. They do, constantly. And that pain is real and deserves to be taken seriously. But the specific pattern that keeps repeating, the same kind of person disappointing you, the same kind of door closing at the same kind of moment, is not proof the world is unfair. It's a printout. And a printout can be traced back to its source. Here is a simple way to feel this law rather than just understand it. Look at a Rubin vase, the old optical illusion, one image that is either a vase or two faces staring at each other, depending on which part of the picture your mind decides is the background. Nothing on the page changes. Only what you are trained to notice changes, and that changes everything you see. This is true of every relationship you have ever been in. The thing itself, the argument, the silence, the slammed door, is never actually the thing. It is background and foreground, waiting for you to decide which pattern you're looking for, which is exactly why a relationship is the fastest laboratory you will ever have access to for testing any of this. Not because the other person is the lesson, because whatever quality disturbs you most reliably in them, whatever you find yourself narrating in your head at 2 a.m. about what they did and why, is printing from somewhere. Test it once, honestly, before you test anything else this video has offered. The next time you catch yourself building a case against someone you love, pause and ask what part of that exact charge, softened or hidden, is also quietly true of you. That single test will tell you more about your own subconscious in 1 week than a decade of blaming the weather. And it points finally toward the part of this entire system that is hardest to accept and impossible to unlearn once you see it. If the outside is only ever a printout of the inside, then the very atoms making up your life, the actual physical matter of it, must be listening too. Physicists ran an experiment that answers this more directly than philosophy ever could, and it is real, replicated, and still strange, no matter how many times you hear it. Fire a single particle of light at a wall with 2 slits cut into it, with no one watching, and it behaves like a wave. It goes through both slits at once, spreading out as pure possibility, exactly the way the Hermetic tradition always claimed reality begins. but the instant a measuring device watches which slit it passes through, the wave collapses. It becomes one particle, taking one path, landing in one exact spot. The physicist John Wheeler, who spent his career studying exactly this, called the universe participatory for a reason. Reality does not fully decide what it is until something conscious is watching it decide. Amit Goswami, a physicist who has spent decades studying consciousness and matter, puts it even more plainly. Consciousness is not a byproduct sitting inside the universe. It is the ground the universe is standing on. This is not a metaphor borrowed from spirituality and taped onto physics after the fact. It is what the experiment keeps showing, run after run, lab after lab, for over a century. Your own brain runs a smaller version of the same experiment daily. Brain imaging shows that vividly picturing something, a fireplace, a familiar room, a face, lights up many of the same visual regions that actually seeing it would. Your nervous system was never built with a hard wall between imagined and real. It treats a sufficiently vivid image as data. This explains something almost no one connects to their own life. Psychologists have long documented ironic process theory. Tell someone, urgently, not to think about a white bear, and within seconds, a white bear is the only thing their mind can produce. The instruction "don't" is not what the brain stores. The image is what it stores. You have spent years telling yourself not to worry, not to repeat the old pattern, not to attract the wrong person again, while the picture underneath the instruction kept running the whole time, unedited. This is exactly the muscle most schooling was never built to train. The educator Ken Robinson made this observation famous. Classrooms were designed to produce a reliable, standardized workforce, not restless imaginations. Correct answers get rewarded. Vivid, divergent imagination gets marked wrong more often than praised. By adulthood, the exact faculty capable of pressing new pictures into matter has been trained to sit down and wait for instructions instead. Which brings this back to a man hiding his real work from a church 300 years ago. Newton never turned literal lead into literal gold, and neither did almost anyone who tried. But the handful of alchemists who documented real transformation left the same conclusion independently. The lead was never only the metal in the crucible. It was whatever in the alchemist was still heavy, still dense, still unrefined. You cannot transmute what's outside you until you locate what's still leaden inside you. That is the secret the tradition was hiding. Not a formula, a mirror. If this part of the video is landing, something in you has likely been circling this question for a long time, which is exactly why it's worth choosing to follow this channel now, before you forget. It keeps walking this same territory, one layer at a time. Here is the practice this video has been walking toward. Complete, not a fragment. Tonight, before sleep, take 2 or 3 minutes. Choose one moment from today, even a small one, and replay it in vivid sensory detail, exactly as the version of you who already knows their own wholeness would have lived it. Not the version where the argument didn't happen, the version where you responded to it already whole. Feel the temperature of the room. Hear your own voice land differently. Let your body believe it, even for 90 seconds. This is not fantasy as escape. It is correspondence, rehearsed on purpose, the same law from the mirror and the printout, now aimed deliberately instead of running on default. Do this consistently, and your outer life will start agreeing, quietly, with what you've been practicing in the dark. And once that starts, an old question turns from theory into something you can feel deciding your future in real time. There is one more image worth carrying out of this video, and it has nothing to do with lead or gold directly. It's about the vessel that holds the transformation. Every alchemist's workshop from that hidden era shared one detail almost none of the old stories bother to mention. Before any transformation could begin, the crucible had to be completely empty. Not clean in the polite sense. Empty. No leftover metal from the last attempt. No residue of what had failed there before. Nothing already claiming space that the new gold might need. An alchemist who kept feeding old failures into a full crucible got exactly what you'd expect. More of the same, cooked at a higher temperature. You have spent this entire video learning that you are the crucible, not metaphorically, literally according to everything the Hermetic tradition has ever taught. Which means the last question worth carrying out of here has nothing to do with technique at all. It has to do with how much room you're actually leaving, every identity you've been defending, every old label, every grievance you keep polishing like it's evidence, every judgment you hold against the parts of yourself still learning. These all take up room in the vessel, not because they were wrong to feel, because a full crucible, however understandable the reasons it filled up, has nowhere left for anything new to form. You do not need to force this open tonight. You do not need a ceremony. You only need to leave a little more space than you did yesterday. One grudge finally set down. One story about yourself gently released. One moment where the old pattern arrives, and instead of feeding it, you simply let it pass through the empty part of the room. You were never failing at this. You were only ever a drop that forgot for a while that it was also the ocean. A scientist who forgot they were also a mystic. An alchemist standing over their own crucible, waiting years for someone to tell them the gold was never somewhere else. It was always the thing being made of you the whole time. Every day you called it manifesting, and every day you didn't. If this found you today for a reason, stay close. Follow this channel because there is a great deal more of this map left to walk together. Share it with 5 people who are also standing in front of their own crucible, wondering why the same old metal keeps showing up in their life. And before you go, leave one honest sentence in the comments. Not a compliment, an honest one. What is still taking up space in your vessel right now? Tell me what you'd want this channel to open next, and I'll meet you there.